Theology proper. We're going to continue our conversation on that today with the communicable and the incommunicable.
Say it again.
Communicable and incommunicable attributes of God. We could do a duet. We'll have our own version of
We're brothers.
One Direction. Oh, we are off the rails already, aren't we? My name is Dan.
We're talking about something serious like theology.
Yeah. And we're the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte. And we are in just an introduction to theology series here at Life Talks. And we're talking about theology proper, which is how do we know God? What are his attributes?
Yep.
How do we know he exists at all? And today we're going to talk about these attributes of God.
Yes.
All right, let's start with incommunicable.
Yeah, so really, the two most, I can't remember who said this, but one person said the two most important questions you have to answer is there a God? And if there is, who is he? And whoever said that, I'm sure is pretty smart, but that's what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. If God does exist, we covered the knowability of God and the existence of God, but really, if you think about some of the major religions, they could still agree with you about that. What we're taking is a Christian theological, biblical perspective on who God is. And so when we think about these attributes, these are attributes that God's word declares about him.
All right. So when we're talking about attributes, there are two categories of attributes.
Yes.
There are attributes that are unique to God,
yep,
that belong to God and God alone.
Yep.
No matter how hard you or I work, try, attempt, discipline ourselves, et cetera, we are not capable of possessing them,
yes,
or possessing them at a level that God possesses them.
Right.
So first of all, we are going to talk about the incommunicable, which are the attributes that belong to God alone.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
What do you have on those important ones?
I've got 10. How many do you got?
12.
Ooh, you win. Ding, 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 ding. You get the beef jerky stick.
Well, thank you. I don't know how to respond to that.
I have eternity, the eternity of God, that he has no beginning and no ending. Do you have that?
Would you consider that infinity?
I would say I think it's different than infinity because God is infinite in his knowledge, being, and power, and has no limitations of... he is not limited by any boundary or limitation.
Okay, so then I didn't have that one.
Okay, so that's eternity. Then I have an infinity.
Okay.
Do you have that?
I have that one.
We're playing like categories right now. So 1 Kings,
I love that.
1 Kings 8:27 is the infinity of God. The next one I have is immutability. Do you have immutability?
I do. Okay,
so the immutability is that God never changes. Malachi 3:6. That he doesn't change, or I think most importantly is he doesn't develop. Like there's no sense of God learning something where he was like, oh man, that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing's ever occurred to God?
Exactly. And he does not change. He doesn't change his character, his nature. Now there are passages of scripture where it talks about God repenting, right, for making mankind. We see that in Genesis chapter 6 when he's with the flood narrative. But that doesn't mean that God actually oh no, I made a mistake. What he was saying is it was a terminology to express God's emotional state of sorrow and disappointment in what man had become. It's not that God was surprised by it. It's not even that God realized he made a mistake. It's just that it was expressing an emotion that we as humans can relate to of what we were doing to him as his creation. So I think it's important to mention that. Now I have the 3 omnis, right?
All 3 of those.
Omnipotence, which is God is all powerful, that there's no limitations to his power, and that all of us as humans, we have limited power and dependent on him. The other one is omniscience. Another, I'd like to give scripture, Matthew 19:26 for omnipotence. Omniscience, God is all knowing, having perfect knowledge of all things past, present, and future. And that's Psalm 147 verse 5. Then you have omnipresence, which is God is everywhere and not bound by time, space, or location. And that is Psalm 139 verses 7 through 10. Do you have anything to add to those?
Nope,
3?
You've got those covered.
Okay. The next one I have is self-sufficiency, that God is self-sufficient and he does not rely on anything or anyone for his existence or well-being. And another way of saying that is the aseity or aseity. Have you heard of that one? The aseity of God is God. It means he exists in and of himself without dependence on anything else for his existence. Very similar to self-sufficiency. Then I have God's sovereignty. Okay, this means God is the supreme ruler and authority over all creation, whereas all of our human authority is limited and derived. Isaiah 46, verse 10. Jesus even said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And then you have the invisibility of God. God is a spirit and does not have a physical form. So there's no limitations on that. So, and then I have one that's potentially one that I didn't know whether to put this one in the communicable or incommunicable. Are you ready for this one? The jealousy of God.
Didn't have that one on my radar.
So the jealousy of God, when God says he's jealous, what he means is, he is able to feel a righteous jealousy because of what he deserves in worship. Whereas for us, our jealousy is always tainted by our own self-desires that, we don't deserve to be, we don't deserve the worship.
And I think it's important that when people see God refer to himself as jealous, he's not talking about the same kind of jealousy that we
No,
see.
that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's where people often, again, assign
human expression,
anthropomorphism type stuff to God that's not appropriate.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are my incommunicable attributes of God.
Well, those were very good.
Yeah. So what did I miss?
I only had two others. I think there's only two others. Nope, three others. So, and you may have covered these. First of all, it would be his transcendence.
Okay.
And that's, he transcends between his essence, so to speak, and his creation, the physical manifestation of his creative power and authority.
Yeah.
So he transcends also time.
Yeah, that's probably one I was trying to figure out how to fit in, because if you think about it, like time, space, reality is, if you could see my hands right now, I'm making like a football shape with my hands. But it's this idea that everything that's happened in time and space, God has created.
Yeah.
And yet God is looking at it. So God is present right now at the creation of the world. God is present right now in the crucifixion of Jesus. He is present right now with you and I, and he's present right now with Jesus returning to earth, because he is outside of that. So it is at some level.
Yeah. And physicists have tried to figure this one out for years.
This is where it's going to make your head explode. But there's nothing that God's like, oh yeah, so yesterday.
Or tomorrow.
For us, we are time-bound creatures, so that's all we can think about is something linearly in our own minds, because we live within that time-space reality. God lives without it, so there is nothing that is happening.
But he can interact within it.
But he interacts within it, so therefore that's what the transcendence means.
Yeah.
So
okay. So the others are a little more obvious, maybe, but uniqueness.
Okay.
In that there's nothing else like him. There's
good.
No one else like him. Isaiah 43:10, 44, 6 and 7 talk about that. And then the one I'm a little surprised you didn't do, but in terms of his holiness. Because he alone is holy.
I know, but I have his holiness in the communicable attributes.
Really?
Yes, because remember he says to be holy as he is holy.
Yeah, but are we capable of being holy?
Well, I think one day we will be, based on the glorification of ourselves. But as far as he still calls us to holiness as he is holy, just like we are called to. None of us will ever be able to love like he loves. Just because they're communicable attributes doesn't mean that we don't show them at some level. We can't show them perfectly like he does.
So here, now we're going to get deep.
Okay.
Created beings have always had the potential to sin.
Correct.
Does God?
No.
Then wouldn't that make him a different level of holy than us?
Yeah, I agree with the sense that there is a level of holiness we'll never be able to attain to. I agree with that.
So it's both communicable and incommunicable.
Can it be though?
In a Venn diagram, it could be.
Wait, Josh, you're the deciding vote.
Okay.
So the law of non-contradiction here would depend on whether you guys are using the word the same way. If you're using the word the same way, then it couldn't be both that and not that at the same time. because
Okay.
even God doesn't break the law of non-contradiction.
That's true.
But I suspect that you guys are using the word holiness slightly differently, and so you both might be right.
Oh,
That
okay.
was-
Okay. I see what you're saying there.
So there might be an equivocation problem going on.
And
So-
we are the
so-
only podcast in the world where the producer is more of an expert and smarter.
So I think what you're saying is you're talking about God's holiness of character in essence, and I'm talking about God's holiness as in righteousness, his being set apart as living holy. Does that make sense?
yeah. It's
So I
everything
think-
systematic.
So
and
I think that
practical.
there's a kind of both and right there.
Okay.
I think.
I can live with
Would
that.
you? I think that's where we're falling
I
on.
can live with that.
If you're still listening to this,
Google it.
Good luck. When all else fails.
Keep going. I'll get back
is,
to you.
is holiness a? Okay.
Okay, we got 10 minutes.
All right, let's do it. Communicable.
All right.
How many do you got? I mean, there's so many, really.
I have. I don't got. I have.
Oh, gee.
I used to teach grammar.
I know.
10.
I have 13.
We each had exactly
Yes,
3 more
yes.
than each other.
All right. You go first this time.
Okay. His goodness,
Yep. Got it.
being good, can only be understood in relationship to God
Yep.
and his character.
Mhm.
He is the ultimate standard of that.
Yep.
Hatred.
I have wrath and anger. Does that fit?
Yeah, that's probably the same thing.
It's
yeah.
very similar to the idea of
But
God's.
the difference is that he does so righteously. We would do it.
But I don't think God ever does. God call us to hate anything? I'm trying to. I'm. This is genuinely. I'm wondering out loud right now.
But well, I would argue that it's like, can you know what light is without darkness?
True. I hate. Yeah. There's a reality of me hating sin, and there's a reality of me being angry at sin. Right.
But isn't
there's a
love
righteous-
the complete absence of love would be hate?
I don't. I think the absence of love is ambivalence
Oh no.
or apathy.
Oh no.
Because I think
Nope,
hate.
Nope.
At hate, you still care at some level.
Not going to agree to that.
Okay.
Next on Life Talks, Dan and Ben.
We haven't had a
argue-
debate. We haven't had a debate episode in a
episodes.
while.
We'll have to come back to this one.
Okay.
All right, justice.
Got justice. Yep.
God always does what is perfectly right.
Yes. And we are invited. All of these he's inviting us into expressing as well in our abilities.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he wants us to.
Yes.
Yeah. Knowledge.
Knowledge. I don't have knowledge. Okay.
The difference is God knows all things
Yep.
simultaneously.
Yes.
Okay. We only know things partially,
Correct. But,
and we're on a journey.
but we're invited because of revelation. We're invited in to know him.
Yeah.
Which is important.
But our knowledge is incomplete,
Yes.
and let's see if you disagree. Will always be incomplete. Do you honestly think that we will someday be as knowledgeable as God?
It's at the. I don't think so. I think you're right on that one.
Oh,
But I know there are some verses that talk about us having, I'm going to come back to that. Can I answer that in the next episode? I'm going to do that.
See, this is what's fun about theology, though, because every once in a while you do get into this like,
I gotta.
oh wow, and that's why God is great to think about.
Yeah.
All right, love.
Yeah.
That's an obvious
Come
one.
on.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. Rationality.
Mm.
So here's the argument. God's mind is perfectly rational, since all that God possesses in knowledge and wisdom necessitates perfect thought, which is rational.
Okay. I think you have a nerd that came up with this list.
I've been called worse. And no, it wasn't Chat GPT. Just saying that. All right.
Who does that?
How about mercy?
I got mercy.
Oh, I knew you would.
Yeah. God is
Okay,
merciful.
so this one's really practical, and I of course we love this because this is what we do.
Yeah.
But just the ability to communicate or speech.
Ooh, I don't have that.
Yeah,
Speech,
he's invited us. I mean, whether we were doing it subliminally or whether we were doing it telepathically or whether we were
Communication.
doing it orally
Yeah.
or whatever,
Okay.
Communication and
Okay.
speech are important. Truthfulness.
Yep. Got truthfulness.
Oh.
Yep.
And I'm sure you got wisdom.
I got wisdom.
All right.
Yeah.
Those
Okay.
are my 10.
Okay. And really, I mean, Dan, there's so many I think that we probably, if we really wanted, like really keep going deeper down this hole.
Yeah, because I didn't see creativity.
I mean, I have grace.
Oh,
God's
yeah.
grace, that God is unmerited favor and kindness towards us. Therefore, he calls us to be gracious and kind to others. I have God's holiness. We just talked about that, but the idea that believers are called to pursue holiness in their lives. And then I have faithfulness. God is faithful. And to his promises, to his covenants, and we are called to be faithful in our commitment and covenant as well.
And I'm thinking of a whole bunch more now because, I ran out of time when I was making the list.
Yeah, I know. And so
but all of the fruit of the Spirit would be, wouldn't it?
Fruit of the Spirit.
Because, those are the consequences
Absolutely.
of... Yeah.
Then I have patience, which again, fruit of the Spirit. God is patient, long-suffering towards us. He encourages us to be patient with others. I have God's compassion for the suffering of the oppressed. Psalm 103, verse 13. We are called to be compassionate towards others. And then I have peace. God is the source of true peace, and he invites us to pursue peace with others and peace with him.
Yep.
So, I mean...
The one you did mention, I mentioned it, I don't think you heard me a while ago. This is because this is one of my favorite ones.
What?
It's creativity.
Yeah.
He's the ultimate creator, but, just think of music.
Oh, I know.
Or just writing.
Yeah.
The infinity of the creative privilege and opportunity.
Yeah.
And people don't see that as a gift from God.
I think really it might be one of the most profound proofs of the Imago Dei inside of us.
Yeah.
That we are able to create like God.
And it's unique to humanity because you say, well, birds sing. Yeah, but they sing the same song over and over.
Yes.
And they're basically saying, come mate with me or I'll murder you. I mean, they don't have a lot of variety. They're either calling for a spouse or they're saying, get out of my way.
The creativity inside of the animal kingdom is programmed creativity.
Yeah.
It's something they must do.
Instinct.
Whereas for us, we can choose and we can go in different ways to create. I mean, we can go in a lot of different directions. Yeah.
So that's one of my favorites.
So with the last few minutes we have left, here's where I want to kind of bring this together. As much as it's important to understand and know these attributes, what's more important than all of these, especially with the communicable ones, is that we're living them. Because Dan, you and I both know there's a lot of people that can recite the verses and God's this and God's that. But this, when we see God and the holiness and the uniqueness and in the power and the majesty of who he is, I mentioned this in the very first episode. These attributes should, number one, make us want to worship him. Should make us want to worship him because of his just incredible greatness. And then the second thing, my response is, we are confronted with this reality of how we do fall short of these attributes that we should be showing, but we're not, which is why Christ came. It's why he gives us the Holy Spirit. This is why he's come to transform us into the fullness of the image of Jesus. And so, again, we're not doing this series so that you become smarter with knowing the communicable and incommunicable attributes of God. We're doing this because we want you to think through I think about the person coming in on Sunday to church. Are they really thinking about the omnipotence, the immutability, the holiness, the wisdom, the love? I mean, these are things that all of us should be coming together, and we sing about these every week, and this should just draw us into who God is. It leads us to worship. It humbles us. It just drives us to say, that's who I want to be close to.
I feel a rant coming on, and we don't have time for it. But
Are you about to rant against me?
No.
I thought that was a beautiful.
And it's inspired me. But that's our culture has lost its fascination with theology because we're summarily dismissing it as anti-intellectual, and yet the greatest works of art, the cathedrals of Europe, down to the very science of their construction, where you can whisper in a corner and it be heard across the room. The way they were designed to point people toward God. Everything is so utilitarian today. Yeah. It's so experiential. It's so consumeristic and that's why I think this is such an important series. I'm so glad you introduced it because when you visit theology, it's like visiting the Louvre. You're going to see the greatest truths in the universe. And everything else now in comparison to that looks like a kid scribbled it with a Crayola. And when we see God for who he is, when we look at him, it forces us to examine our motivations, our attitudes, our everything. And Socrates said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. And yet so many people are living this superficial, TikTok life of distractions and repetitious nonsense. And we consider crap art.
Yeah.
When if we would understand God, he will elevate us.
Yeah.
He'll inspire us. And he'll make us more sophisticated in our view. So
I love that.
Anyway, a little bit of a rant.
That's
Don't
good.
you want to know who is right about communicable versus
Oh,
incommunicable
he's
holiness?
been Googling. Here
I've
we
been
go.
Googling this entire time.
Yes.
All right,
All
so
right.
here's the deal. And this is the best way to research. So starting with Google and it's going down through a whole bunch of articles that look like from decent sources. But I've got 2 articles that put holiness in the communicable category. I've got 2 articles that put holiness in the incommunicable category. And I have one that puts it in both. That says it's really both. And so I think in the end, you're both right, which
It's
really
a
means
tie.
that all 3 of us
Yes.
were right.
All right.
Oh, there we
We're
go.
all right.
And now let us join hands and sing Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. All right. Well, that wraps up this episode. It represents theology. It wraps up theology proper, but we're just getting started on our look at theology here at Life Talks. As always, thanks for joining us. If you've got questions, suggestions, ideas, or thoughts, please feel free to share them with us at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. And until next time, thanks as always for joining us at Life Talks.